sir. Hi, classmates. I'm Angelica Ramirez, and I'm here to report about baking. First, we will talk about baking. What is baking? Baking is a food cooking method using prolonged dry heat acting by ashes. It is a method of preparing food that uses dry heat, typically in an oven, but also can be done in hot ashes or on hot stone. Bread is the most common baked item. A person who prepares and bakes goods as a profession is called baker. To be successful in baking, one needs functional knowledge of tools and equipment, baking terms, processes, techniques, and skills. Knowledge of the baking basics will enable you to produce good quality products. We go now on the history of baking. Where and when did baking originated? Baking flourished in the Roman Empire in about 300 BC. Pastry cooking became an occupation for Romans, known as pastillarium. Did you know who was the first person to bake? According to the food historians, the ancient Egyptians were the first culture to show evidence of advanced baking skill. Now back to baking. Pastry cooking, or so-called pastillarium, became respected profession because pastry were considered decadent and Romans loved festivity and celebration. Thus, pastry were tend of cooked especially for large banquet. Any pastry cook who could invent new types of tasty treats was highly prized. Around 1 AD, there were more than 300 pastry chefs in Rome, and Cato wrote about how they created all sorts of diverse foods and flourished because of those foods. Cato spoke of an enormous amount of breads. This includes amongst these are libiums. Libiums is a sacrificial cake made with flour, placenta, groats and cress, spira, our modern-day pretzel, sibilita, tortes, suveolum, sweet cake, globus aperica, fritters. A great selection of these with many different variations. Different ingredients and varied patterns were found at banquets and dining halls. The Romans baked bread in an oven with its own chimney and had mills to grind grain into flour. Eventually, because of Rome, the art of baking became known throughout Europe and eventually spread to the eastern part of Asia. Bakers often baked goods at home and then sold them in the streets. This was common that Rembrandt illustrated a work that depicted a pastry chef selling pancakes in the street of Germany with children clamoring for a sample. In London, pastry chefs sold their goods from handcarts. This developed into a system of delivery of baked goods to households, and demand increased greatly as a result. In Paris, the first open-air cafe of baked goods was developed, and baking became an established throughout the entire world. Baking in America. The baking industry was brought to America with Jamestown colonies. In 1604, commercial bakeries were operating. They met with rugged competition from colonial housewives who baked in ovens just as efficiently as those of the commercial bakers. The baking industry saw a little change from Roman times until industrialization period in the US in last half of the 19th century. The new improvements were in oven constructions and mixing chews and also in products. The 19th century bakers made breads, cakes, pies, biscuits, cookies, and crackers. Baking in Philippines. In early 1960, baking industry in the Philippines was rated about the same level baking was in the US in mid-1800s. The quality of baked goods was not conducive to increased consumptions because of outmoded bake shops techniques. Flour quality for exceed the Filipino bakers' ability to use it properly. At present, baking business in Philippines is a booming occupation. Bakeries have mushroomed in almost every corner in the country. Bakeries employ hundreds of bakers. And that's all about baking and history of baking. I'm Angelica Rihanna Ramirez, reporting about baking. Thank you.